Welcome back, brothers and sisters. This is Days of Noah number 71, and it's been about 4 months since I've done a video. I've really missed interacting with the listeners. A lot's happened in the last 4 months, both in the world and for me personally. Without getting into too many of my personal details, I'll just tell you that I'm now officially unemployed, or I jokingly say to my wife, I'm now retired. I've been in the medical field for over 20 years. I'm a board certified surgeon. I've done surgery every week, except for, a couple of weeks a year that I take vacation. So I've done surgery 50 weeks a year for over 15 years. And have 20 years of operating experience doing bone and joint surgery on human beings. And it's been a lot of responsibility. It's been a great blessing to help people. It hasn't always gone as smoothly as I would have liked. But, the Lord was with me throughout that time. And we were able to help a lot of people and keep a lot of people going. And then, the medical system has betrayed us now. And, we have a government hostile takeover from the top down who are, rooting out doctors, nurses, first responders, firemen, police, military. Did you know that 20% of our military are going to be dishonorably discharged? That's 1/5 of our armed forces who protect this country are being washed out of the military. And when you're dishonorably discharged, it means you can't receive your retirement, your health insurance, or anything. So, what kind of government would come against its own military? We have about 20 to 25% of the healthcare industry is being rooted out. And so it's evident that the Biden regime is coming against the United States in a very aggressive fashion. And my particular situation is just I'm one of the many victims of this system. And it was not an easy decision to make. I'm getting ready to turn 48 years old. My wife is pregnant again with probably our final child. And to be knocking on a half a century, to be looking 50 in the eye, and still have babies in the womb, and have your career and your job taken from you, health care for a family of 5 taken from you. That's not a decision I made very lightly, but it is something that I very seriously and genuinely pursued. I wake up early every morning and pray and seek the Lord's counsel and his guidance, and ask the Lord, what would you have me do? And the scripture says that Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, and they will not follow the voice of another. And over the course of 6 months of prayer and seeking the counsel of the Holy Spirit, it became clear to me that it was the voice of another that would have me take the snake bite. And so I couldn't in good faith violate my conscience and my beliefs by doing that. I wrote a very extremely powerful religious exemption regarding the scriptures and my body being a holy temple, and life is in the blood, and that we shouldn't be receiving anything that can potentially be experimental and affect our DNA and the way we were created. And it didn't matter, because the hospital administration rejected that, along with every other person that I know. They rejected all the medical exemptions. They rejected all the religious exemptions. And what it's become clear is that it's no longer about health or wellness or medicine, but it's purely about politics, power, and control and money. And so we are looking at a regime change. This is a soft kill, and there's just no telling what's coming. I will let the listeners know that I'm preparing some videos that are pretty intense. They're very straightforward. Unfortunately, YouTube has become so hardcore on censorship that you really can't speak anything unless it's along the narrative that they want. And so that's sort of held me back for a long time. But I finally realized that, you know what, there are other platforms in this world. And so I kind of broke ground on some new videos regarding, I'm not even going to mention what it is, but I think those listening can surmise what the topic is. But I'll just tell you, it's going to be called The Web of Lies. And we are going to completely break down and from top to bottom every lie that this administration and this New World Order group have portrayed over the last 2 years. And those videos are going to be uploaded at some point, probably in the next month, on other platforms, BitChute and Brighteon and Rumble and things of that nature. And so when that time comes along, I will definitely leave a video here on YouTube to my subscribers so that they know where they can find that information. Being a doctor, first of all, we all know that doctors think that they're smarter than they are. I've worked very hard over the years to not subscribe to that. I come from a blue-collar family. My father was born in the Oklahoma Dust Bowls of the 1930s. He was born in a barn. He had an outhouse and kerosene lamps, and he grew up with a family of 8 brothers and sisters. And by the time the early 40s hit, they were so broke that the whole family got into a truck and they drove to California and started picking cotton. Very similar to the hillbilly movie on the old black and white hillbilly TV series. I can't think of it right now, but the point I'm trying to make is this. I didn't come from some big, fancy, wealthy background. I came from hardworking, salt of the earth people who made sure that you never forgot where your roots were. And even though I was one of the few in my family to get a higher education and become a doctor and a surgeon, I never allowed that to affect my spirit, that these doctors who have this God complex. And we're dealing with them now with people like Dr. Fauci, who is one of the world's greatest liars, manipulators, and deceivers that have ever walked the planet. And so, what I would say to the listeners is that I'm not that guy. I try to follow the Lord, and the scripture says that God rejects the proud and he honors the humble. And I do what I can to try and stay humble and not have some big doctor God complex. But the reason I bring that up is being a doctor and reading studies and literature for over 20 years, understanding anatomy and physiology, having studied pharmacology for years, infectious disease for years. On a weekly basis, I'm treating resistant staph infections, necrotizing fasciitis, gas gangrene, deep bone and joint infections, osteomyelitis. And so you just, you do that for 20 years and you start to hone your craft and you begin to learn about infectious disease. You begin to learn about viral and bacterial biology. And that has helped me discern the times. And so the other thing is that, the Holy Spirit 10 years ago when I came to Christ and started walking with the Lord, he sort of unveiled my eyes with the dark side and being able to start to understand the occult a little bit. I don't have full understanding of it. Nobody does. It's supernatural. But, over the years, the Lord has begun to give me the gift of discernment of the spiritual circumstances. And so I believe that the new series that I'm doing called The Web of Lies, it's a combination of medical facts and medical details about genomic sequences and all the different things that are invested in what's going on in the world today. We're looking at it from a medical side of view, but then also I can extrapolate on all of the occult symbolism, and there is a ton of occult symbolism that's going on right now with the current global situation that I won't mention on this platform. And so, for those of you who are interested, you can follow me over there and and hopefully glean some level of truth. Now, today we're going to do Days of Noah 71, which is about polygamy. And you may say, "Gosh, why polygamy? That's really not that pertinent of a topic right now." And what I would say to you is that I didn't choose it; it chose me. And by that, what I mean is, and this is how it works for me, and it works for everybody differently. The Lord speaks to people differently. He speaks to people through scripture and through music and through prayer and so on and so forth. For me, in this particular situation, last year I was traveling to Nevada, and I was passing through Salt Lake City, which most of you understand is in Utah and is Mormon country. And this is not a video that's meant to interrogate Mormons. I have having grown up on the West Coast near Utah, I have a lot of friends. I used to play football. Half the starting linemen on my football team were all Mormons, and some of my best friends. And also, I have multiple family members as we speak who live in Utah who are Mormons. And so this isn't me standing from a position, where I'm looking down and trying to beat up on the Mormon church. But nonetheless, truth is still truth, and we should not be afraid of truth. And Jesus said that the truth will set you free. And so, it's my due diligence to reveal the truth wherever it lies. And then you, as the interpreter, can come to your own decision making about that system at a later time. But as I was passing through Salt Lake City, now it had been a long day, and I was tired and a little jet lagged and wore out, a travel day. And we got to Salt Lake City, and there wasn't a lot going on there. It is a major hub on the West Coast, and just wanted to sit down and relax. And I'm not here to advocate alcohol consumption, because there's a lot of people that cannot do it with discipline. I don't believe that having a drink is a sin. And I think that I can prove that scripturally, although I'm not going to. But I do think that it's a slippery slope, and we all know that it can very quickly lead to sin. Drunkenness and revelry and clearly can lead to an inhibition of one's moral fortitude and lead them down a dark pathway. And I'd be lying if I said that that hasn't happened to me in my past, because as I mentioned before, the first 30 plus years of my life was just me running with a fast and loose crowd, running with the devil, so to speak. And that involved everything that you can think of, alcohol, drugs, and much more. So I understand that it's a gateway. That being said, on this particular day, a travel day, being tired and jet lagged, I just really wanted to relax and sleep. And so on this plane, so we were in the airport. We had a couple hours to kill, and there's a bar and restaurant there. And we went in and sat down, and I ordered a beer, a porter beer to be precise, which are pretty powerful, pretty potent beers. And when the server brought the beer and he set it down, this is what I looked at, and immediately I had a check in my spirit. I knew that what I was looking at had to do with the Genesis 6. That's what the Holy Spirit had revealed and quickened to my spirit. Now, I didn't have, it took time and study and meditation and prayer for it to become unveiled. But it was an instantaneous check in my spirit that there was something going on. And so that is what has birthed this video, Days of Noah 71. And so when I say that it chose me, I mean that, because I didn't just wake up one day and say, well, I'm getting bored and I don't have enough material, so let's do a video on polygamy. No, that was the last thing on my mind. But again, I follow where the Lord leads, and it led me to the Salt Lake City airport. It led me to ordering this beer, and so it's led to this video, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, before we get into it, I want to do a quick, thorough review of the Genesis 6 conspiracy that happened before the flood. For those of you who are new to the channel, this is sort of this is kind of the foundational position, or teaching that I kind of cling to, is that the world before the flood was vastly different than what many of us have presumed it to be. There was a point in time when there were large, giant, hybrid, cannibal, blood-drinking, idolatrous fornicators that were operating on the entire globe, such to the point that the Almighty Lord God had to literally destroy every man, woman, child, and beast on the planet with a flood, except for Noah and his immediate family, because as the scripture clarifies, he was pure in his generations. He was tamim. He was genetically spotless and could serve as an archetype that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. Noah was truly an Adamite. He was truly made of the Adamic nature according to what God had created. And so he was perfect in his generations. And so what I would like to demonstrate today is that almost all of the sin that we see on the planet today can be derived back before the flood. And I believe we'll be able to show conclusively that polygamy and this concept of multiple wives, it actually derives from the fallen angels in Genesis 6. And so we'll go ahead and review those books now. So Genesis 6 says, "Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God," that's the fallen angels, the Hebrew there is the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, "they saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful." Now that's a very important detail. They saw them, and they recognized that they were beautiful. And I'm going to elaborate on that detail in a moment. But notice that it began with the eyes. Remember, the scripture calls these rebel angels watchers. We know that they descended from the higher heavens down to, our four-dimensional time space. I don't understand how that all works. It's supernatural and metaphysical, but nonetheless, it happened. And when they came into our universe, so to speak, our construct, they took on flesh. And then they began to observe and watch the women, the daughters of men. And, as angels, as spiritual beings who've never had to deal with a flesh and bone corporal body with hormones and everything, you can think of these angels like a bunch of, 16-year-old, pent up schoolboys, that the moment they took on that flesh and started to walk in that embodiment, and we know they descended onto Mount Hermon, which is the highest mountain in the entire sort of Syrian mountains, and that's where they made the pact, the oath. That's what Mount Hermon means. It's an oath that they were going to break God's laws, that they were going to go outside of the genetic barriers and boundaries that God had prescribed, and that these angels, were going to go sleep with women and beget children. But before they took the women and they slept with them, they watched them. And I think this is probably the origin of pornography in an essence, is that the five senses are powerful. To imagine being a spiritual being who doesn't possess a body and then instantly coming into full body possession with five senses and being able to see with your new eyes these women and being able to feel these sexual urges and tensions, they lusted after the women and then they took them. So the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves. Notice it's plural. They didn't just go down and pick out one, nice gal. They took wives, multiple women for themselves, all who they chose. And then we see what the consequence of that union was. There were giants on the earth in those days and also afterward when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them. So it's clear that these children are these giants. And that makes them hybrids, half human, half angels. And these were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. And the mighty men of old and the men of renown is another way of saying that these are the ancient, famous, mythological heroes that exist way back in the day. And so, this would be the Hercules and the Achilles and all of the great and mighty mythological titans that have existed throughout human literature and even today in Hollywood, that fulfill this verse, that even today we still have these mighty men of old, men of renown who exist within the human consciousness that we acknowledge going all the way back to when even Moses wrote this thousands of years ago. Now, Enoch 6 has a slightly different rendition. It came to pass when the sons of men had multiplied in those days, that were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the sons of heaven, saw and lusted after them and said, Come, let us choose wives from among the children, and let us beget children. So we see that these angels, again, notice that it says that they saw and lusted after them. The text could have skipped this word. It could have just simply said that the angels, the sons of heaven, lusted after the women. But in each account, it goes out of its way to tell us that they saw them first. And most people would skip over this detail, but again, they're called the watchers. We don't know how long they watched the women. They might have watched them for 2 weeks for all we know. Bottom line is, the same way that we see today with different levels of perversion is that when you begin to watch sexuality, when you begin to look with your eyes, when you begin to watch pornography, it prepares you, to be blunt, it makes a person horny. It makes a person aroused. It makes them ready for sex. And so this is what happened with the angels. They watched, in their new bodies, they watched the women, they felt themselves get aroused, and then they went down and took multiple wives. And they took them for the purposes of having sex with them and making children. And so they made them their wives. And, at this point, they're breaking all of God's laws. So do you think after totally defying the Most High God that now all of a sudden you're going to have a little bit of obedience and go, well, we're going to go ahead and break God's laws, but I think we better just take one wife? No. It's one of them deals. It's kind of like when you're playing Texas Hold'em and you get to that point where, you're all in. When you're all in, you're all in. You've already defied the Most High God. You've already made the oath. You already know that when judgment comes, you're in for it. So if you're going to do it, you might as well go all the way. And that's what they did. They took as many women as they could because they wanted to spread that fallen angelic seed into many women as possible and create as many hybrid children as possible to totally succumb and overwhelm the earth and all of those made of the Adamic race. So the next book would be the book of Yashar, chapter 4. And the rulers, they went to the daughters of men, and they took their wives by force. So we're given a little extra detail. The wives didn't necessarily want to go along with it. They were coerced into it, and we're going to look at that in greater detail in a moment. They took the wives by force from their husbands, so they're committing adultery here, And this is one of the reasons why we see later in Deuteronomy and Leviticus that God lists this off as one of the 10 Commandments to not commit adultery, because that was a widespread practice prior to the flood, as was idolatry and all of the other things. So they took the wives by force from their husbands according to their choice. And the sons of men in those days took from the cattle of the earth and the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air, and they taught the mixture of animals of one species with another in order to provoke the Lord. And God saw the whole earth, and it was corrupt. That word means the flesh. It was genetically corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. So now we begin to see why the flood had to come. Not only were these angels sleeping with these women and making hybrids, and a lot of them. We're not talking about 2 or 3 of them here. We're talking about millions of hybrids existed on the planet at that time. And we're going to look at the timelines eventually, but it's almost a millennia here. It's almost 1,000 years from when they descended in the days of Jared until the flood came. So these fallen angels had a millennia to mate with these women and create hybrids. So you can imagine how many millions or billions or whatever hybrids were running around the planet. And then they taught these men how to mix the cattle. Cattle, like cows with horns. Cattle, beasts of the field like serpents, and fowls of the air with different species. This is called chimeras. They were making all kinds of evil, wicked abominations, not only animal to animal, but animal to human. Where do you think a centaur comes from? Half man, half bull. From the cattle that they mix with the humans. Where do you think that Medusa comes from? Half woman, half serpent. From the beasts in the field. That's what the Nakash was referred to as, a serpent. Half human, half serpent. Where do you think, Pegasus comes from? A horse with wings. From mixing the cattle with the fowls of the air, so that you now have a horse that has wings. They mixed the DNA. They completely distorted everything that God had created in Genesis 2. When we read Genesis 2, it says that God created everything according to its own image and its own kind. He had a genetic prescription for everything he made, a blueprint. And they came in here and they totally distorted everything. And by the way, can I just tell you, and I've said this before, that the Genesis 6 scenario was typology and foreshadowing of the second coming. That things got so bad that God had to destroy the entire planet once before by water. And things are going to get so bad in the last days that God will have to destroy it again, this time by fire. But it's the same circumstances that trigger the destruction. When the days of Noah return, so will it be with the coming of the Son of Man. And this has everything to do with what's going on this planet today. And we're going to get into this in greater detail on a different platform where, the First Amendment still applies and we can speak freely. But make no mistake, the days of Noah are here. It's much more subtle because we don't see minotaurs walking around. But I can assure you, as the sun will come up tomorrow, that there is genetic contamination on a vast level transpiring all across this globe, with recombinant DNA, transhumanism, and chimera formation, both in humans, animals, and everything that walks the planet. As we speak, they are bioengineering and terraforming the planet in vast ways that we're going to really get into at a different time. And so there are many parallels between what happened in Noah's day and what is happening in our current day that we'll look at as time goes on. But to conclude the review here, we have one book left, and that's Jubilee. And it came to pass when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee. that they were beautiful to look upon. See, they admired and lusted after them with their eyes before they ever decided to do anything with their bodies. And I think that should be a lesson to all of us. Jesus said that, if your eye leads you to sin, then you might be better off to pluck it out and cast it away than to end up in hell. And I don't think he meant literally cut your eye out, but the point he's making is that it's, sin starts off with a thought. It starts off with your flesh, and then it leads, as you continue to walk in that thought, it leads to sin, and we know sin leads to death. And so, one of the things that I've tried to incorporate in my life over the years, understanding just how fleshly and carnal my body is that, I just don't entertain my eyes. So if I see a beautiful woman heading my way in a short, dress, I instantaneously look away. I will not entertain that because I know exactly where my mind will go. It's been genetically programmed to do that because of the fall in the garden and all of the contamination of our flesh. And so, you just don't look at it. And I don't watch a lot of television, but if we're watching TV and all of a sudden a sex scene comes on, my wife already knows that I'm going to plug my ears and close my eyes until it's over. And a lot of people might say, you're taking this a little too far, Dave. Listen, I already know what it's like to struggle with the flesh. And in my prior years, I struggled with pornography and everything that, my buddies and everything that we walked in, years ago. It would be very easy for that to come back into my life. But you know what? I don't entertain that stuff. The same way that I'm not going to put a physical toxins into my body because they'll hurt me physically, I'm not going to put spiritual toxins into my spiritual body so that they'll hurt me spiritually. So yes, when a sex scene comes on and there are sounds that are being emitted and there are sensual visions that are taking place on the screen, I don't look at it. I don't participate in it. Not because I'm holier than thou, but because I understand that it begins with my eyes. That's the origin of this sin. And pretty soon you start watching it, then pretty soon you start thinking about it, then pretty soon you start acting on it, and 5 years later you're cheating on your wife and committing all kinds of perverted decisions because the spirit of lust has gained entrance into your vessel. And so that's just a little, personal anecdotal information for the listeners that the Son of Man was right. If your eye is leading you to sin, then you need to do something about that eye. And what I would tell you is train your eyes and your ears. Train them to not look at the temptation. And you'll be amazed how you start to come out of some of that stuff. So again, we see that they took themselves wives, multiple wives, all of who they chose, and they bore the giants, and then lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way, men and cattle and beasts and birds. See how here we're told men and cattle and beasts and birds? A lot of people have said, no, they mixed the animals, but they didn't mix humans with animals. Why would these sick abomination hybrids who had no problem mixing angels with humans, why would they stop there? What makes you think they're going to have a problem mixing beasts with animals? Where do you think bestiality came from? I assure you, they genetically made human-animal chimeras exactly like we're doing today. And if any of you deny that there are human-animal chimeras, then we've done multiple videos on the Transhumanism Project that go into that in great detail. And I'll just remind you that the snake bite that they're trying to coerce into every man, woman, and child on this planet has the ChAdOx2 enzyme in it, which is chimpanzee human adenovirus recombinant DNA. So, and that's just a scratch on the surface of what they're putting in these things. And so, yes, they mix the men and the women with the cattle, the beasts, and the birds. and they corrupted everything. And when God looked down and he saw everything distorted, all the animals were genetically mutated, multiple heads and different body parts, and humans were walking around with, animal parts, and it was just a complete genetic abomination. And the only ones that were clean and pure were Noah and his family. What would you do? Of course, he reached right into his creation. He grabbed that which was still clean and holy. He put it on a boat and he said, you know what? The hell with this. Literally, he hit the reset button and he wiped them all out and took care of business. And hold on a sec, guys. I got to let my dog out. Excuse me for one moment. By the way, one advantage of getting fired is that I'm sitting here on December 1st, 2021, Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. and making a video for y'all. So, if I wasn't fired, that would not be happening, I can assure you. I'd be grinding it out right now at the office, seeing as many patients as we can see in a day. So I guess there are, God works in mysterious ways. But anyway, just to finish up, so the men, the cattle, the beasts, and the birds, all of them corrupted their ways, all of them, and their orders. When they use the word order, they mean like genetic order, like the classification, the phylum, and the orders of men, beasts, and cattle were all manipulated. And then look what happened. They began to devour each other, and lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts was evil continually. So now we're moving into blood drinking, vampirism, cannibalism. This is really like the origin and the root of Satanism. I mean, to this day, we've got this sick, evil, wicked New World Order system who are trying to literally sack the planet. And we know that these are a bunch of pedophile, blood drinking, cannibalistic, wicked, evil. I hesitate to even use the word people because I believe half of them are hybrids and fallen entities who are masquerading as human beings. But it all, the whole story is all woven together, going all the way back to the pre-flood era. Okay, so we've gone through the review. Let's start breaking this beer down. So. It's a really interesting image. And the first thing that I saw when they brought me the beer was the way that this man was holding this woman and the way he was looking up. He was looking up at something with a look on his face as if he understands that he's just made one hell of a decision. He's crossed the line and there's no going back. And he's obviously looking up to the third heaven. He's looking up to God in defiance because he is one of the rebel angels, And whether this, represents a regular angel or even possibly Lucifer himself is difficult to say, although I'll make the argument in a moment that it is Lucifer or Satan who concocted the entire Genesis 6 plan. But whenever you see imagery of the Genesis 6 scenario where the angels took the women, a couple of the things that you'll see consistently is that, one, the men and women are always naked because they're trying to demonstrate sexuality. So again, we see that here. And what I'm going to try and do moving forward is prove that this beer is based on Genesis 6. And so I will start to lay down those reasons. One, the imagery of the nakedness. Two, we'll see that the men are all built the same. They're lean, muscular men with a full head of hair, kind of the tall, dark, and handsome. And we'll look at that in a moment. Three is the posturing. The angel here is trying to take the woman by force, which is why she's pulling back. And that's why that they're acting kind of coy over here. You see how they're turning away with their head on their shoulder and they're covering up their chest. On the surface, they're acting like they don't want this to happen. But when you look deeper, you can see the expression on her face. She looks like she's been mesmerized or had a spell put on her, so to speak, and that she's now, in the mood and ready to proceed forward. Same thing over here on the other side. She's pulling back with her head, but look at her leg. See how her leg is positioned? That's a position of, when you're, being sensual with someone. So, what we're going to see here in a moment when we look at it is the fallen angels used a deceptive means by which they took the women. They taught the mixing of roots and herbs in order to invent sorcery and to make spells. And this is where the word enchantment comes from. An enchantment is something that you would give someone to enchant them so that you could then be with them. And so the reality of it is that in their own in their own right minds, these women probably didn't want to be with these angels. But after they got buttered up with the mind-altering substances that the angels taught them and gave them, they broke them down. Their inhibitions were broken down, and they finally succumbed. Very similar to what we see in today's modern times, where I've known many a men to go out and party and get girls drunk, and when they're drunk, they'll kind of take on this same appearance, and they'll do things that they wouldn't have done if they hadn't been under the influence of mind-altering substances. And so that's the symbolism that's being displayed here. Also, now when I was in the bar, this is the only imagery we saw. This was my waiter. I asked him if I could take a picture of his shirt. This is what we see. There's nothing to do with angels here. You already saw the beer mug on the previous slide. There was nothing to do with angels. So, I hadn't fully confirmed with 100% authenticity that it was about the watcher angels, but I deeply suspected it. And then when I got home the next day, I started doing some research on the internet and found this image to the right. Here's the original porterhouse beer image. And what do you see? You see the same man with the woman and the two girls side by side, surrounded by angels. And so this was definitely the smoking gun that clarified that my hunch was correct, that this whole account is based on the angels. And so this is the origin of polygamy. And we're going to look at that more closely going forward, but there's just so much symbolism here that we need to take a look at. Now, the first thing I want to say is most people agree on the Genesis 6 scenario. We just reviewed it, 4 different accounts from 4 different ancient texts. It's very clear. The angels, that we weren't given any names, these unnamed angels took these unnamed women and they mated with them and made hybrids. People do not have a problem accepting that. If you've followed any of my, material, the Seed Wars and so on and so forth, I believe that the transgression actually happened a few chapters earlier. Instead of surmising that the origin is in the Genesis 6 account, I believe it started in Genesis 3. And that the only difference is that we're given more personal details, which is often why people really reject it, because it does make it very personal when I say perhaps Lucifer, mated with Eve. And when people hear that, it's just unbelievable. They really have a hard time with that. So, I wasn't there. I mean, I don't know with 100% certainty that that's what happened. I'm just going to where the evidence points and to what I feel like I've been led to. We all have to discern for ourselves, and let's face it, what happened in the garden is truly a mystery. And hopefully one day when we leave this world and move to the next, the Lord will reveal us everything. But so for me, my starting point is Genesis 3, that Lucifer came down from the higher heavens. He was cast out, remember, because of his pridefulness. And he came down to planet Earth. And he is a seraphim, cherubim, reptilian entity, an angel. Angels, they used to call angels seraphs, fiery flying dragons. They have reptilian qualities. But as we've just demonstrated, in Genesis 6, they can also take on human flesh temporarily. It's not their real appearance, but they're shapeshifters. And so, whether Lucifer, who is this reptilian man dragon, I don't think he probably came at Eve looking like that. I mean, he probably shapeshifted into more of a human figure. But nonetheless, I believe that he seduced Eve into having, relations, and that is the true birth of the seed of the serpent, who is Cain and all of his progeny. And even in the New Testament, we're told that, Cain is the son of the wicked one, the devil. And I take a literal stance on that. And if you don't, that's fine, brothers and sisters. We don't have to see eye to eye on every detail. We're just people. We're just doing what we can. We all see through the glass half dimly. So, if you don't agree with that, that's fine. You don't have to leave me 50 comments telling me what a heretic I am, okay? It's just my opinion. And I think that even this imagery here tries to reveal the same thing. And I'll show you why. If you do a literature search on Lucifer himself, you're going to see that people have been inspired, men and women over the course of history have been inspired to draw and display in artistic form what Lucifer looks like. And you're going to see the same kind of iconography. You're going to see an attractive man. He's almost always naked. Why do you think that these men and women who draw Lucifer always have to do it in a way that reveals his naked flesh? And I would say because in a subconscious level, they understand that he's a sexual being, and he wanted to have sex with the young, beautiful, naive Virgin Eve. And so he's displayed as they don't show him as some big fat slob. He's a young, thin, muscular, virile man with a full set of hair, tall, dark, and handsome. Same thing down here, They show the muscle tone. They show the thick hair with these little curls that almost look like represent his horns. And this reminds me of what we see over here on the beer mug. This guy is naked. You can tell that he's lean, he's toned, and he's got that full head of hair. And, he's got the halo behind his head, like we see here of this demonstration of Lucifer with the halo. And so, if you didn't know any better, you'd say that the guy over here on this beer mug was the master godfather, Lucifer himself. We even see some similarities with his clothing. Over here on the bottom right, this is sort of the famous image of Lucifer, the fall of Satan. He's got this loincloth that just happens to cover, his genitals, nothing else. Well, over here, we see the same thing. This guy's got just enough loincloth to cover his genitals, which, by the way, looks a lot like a serpent, the way a serpent would be wrapped up around your leg. And we'll look at that more in a moment. So, whether this is a symbolic representation of Lucifer sleeping with the women or Genesis 6 is debatable. What's really interesting is when you look at this image with the actual liquid, the beer inside of the glass, it takes on a different representation than when the glass is empty. You can see that there's sort of a negative space here, that over here on the right, this becomes a very pronounced image right here. And I believe that that is the tail of this serpent that's wrapped around his leg. In fact, when you look at, if you did a literature search of the tail of the devil, this is what you get. Same thing over here. And so you can see that they've included some interesting imagery here, as well as this serpent wrapped around his leg, which is this red color. They didn't choose that color just haphazardly. I mean, look over here on the left. We know that the devil, symbolically speaking, is represented by red. Whether Lucifer himself was truly red or not, is anybody's guess. But we know symbolically he is red, and so that's why we see this imagery on the glass. So we're looking at the Polygamy Porter beer, Salt Lake City, where we know that polygamy is basically legalized and is transpiring in the Mormon Church. And there's some funny innuendos here. Why just have one is the motto. And obviously there's a double meaning there. They're saying, why just have one beer? Because this is a beer company trying to make money from selling beer. But what they're really saying is, why just have one wife? If these watchers are going to defy the Most High God and take a wife, they're not going to just stop with one. They're going to get as many wives as they can. And I believe in their lewdness and their perversion that they wanted the youngest wives. They weren't looking for a bunch of old ladies down there on planet Earth. The younger the women, probably the better. I suspect that this is the true origin of pedophilia. And that these angels wanted these very young, sort of prepubescent women who are the most ripe, so to speak, for impregnating and having children. It also says, bring some home to the wives. And, what they're saying there is that that's a very important innuendo symbolically. And it means this. Women aren't always going to do, what you want them to do. But if you get them drunk, or if you get them under mind-altering substances, then they're, very much more likely to participate in whatever it is that you're trying to engage them in. And so that's what they're saying here. They're saying that this is a beer company, so we have to put it in perspective. They're selling this beer so people will get a buzz. And that's what they're implying here on the cover. These angels got these women drunk, so to speak. Now, I don't know if they had beer back then. I highly doubt it. But we do know, the book of Enoch makes it clear that these fallen angels in the days of Enoch, they taught the women the mixture of roots and herbs to open up the pineal gland and have an impact on them. And so that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to manipulate these women. Now, if you look at the Nakash in the garden, I call him the man dragon because of the mandragora plant, and we're not going to get into that now, but there's these ancient legends of these man dragons, these reptilian humanoids who used to use roots and herbs and make concoctions or cocktails and give it to the women. And once the women would drink it, they would give into sexual relations with these entities that they probably would have never considered doing if they were sober. And so that's actually what the word Nakash means in the garden. The noun version is serpent, but the verb form of the serpent means a diviner or a soothsayer or an enchanter, one who whispers in your ear and gives you an enchantment to put a spell over you. Think about that for a second. The serpent went into the garden and he used the devil's apple or the love apple, which we've looked at before. And he gave it to Eve. He probably didn't look like this. This is his natural appearance. He probably shapeshifted into a human form, similar to what we saw in the previous slide, some slick, looking cat. He came rolling in. Here's the young, beautiful Eve, naked, virgin, young. And he gave her the love apple, and he enticed her, so to speak, and enchanted her, and then he was able to impregnate her with the seed of Cain. And it's funny, the word enchantment, if you look up the word enchantment in the Bible, which we see back in like Deuteronomy and Leviticus, about God says not to talk with the dead, no necromancy, medium, don't be a medium, don't be a witch, don't get into sorcery. God doesn't want you in the occult at all. If you look up the word enchantment, it's Strong's H5173. Guess where it derives from? It actually derives from the word nakash, Strong's 5172, the serpent in the garden. And so I think that these are all important details, because what's being implied in this beer advertisement here is that take some home to your wives, get them drunk, and do what the angels did. Get them to do things that they would never do because they're not in their right mind. And this is why the Bible says don't get drunk. The Bible knows that this alcohol and these drugs are a gateway. So if you don't have self-control, and if you can't do it with self-control, then you better not do it, because it's going to lead to sin. The other thing I would point out here is the name of the brewery, Wasatch Beers. It sounds a lot like watch, W-A-T-C-H. These are the Watchers. So we're going to go just a little bit deeper on the symbolism. So here's another image here, Wasatch Brewery, Polygamy, Porter Beer. Notice the mountain. Remember that the angels descended from the star systems. We believe it's Orion, because Orion has to do with the giant constellation in the sky that's associated with the Nephilim. So they descended from the star systems onto the highest mountain in all of the Middle East, which is Mount Hermon in the Syrian mountains. They descended to the peak of Mount Hermon, and it's there that they made the oath, or the pact, to watch and observe, lust after, and take the women. So they just happen to include a mountain here with the word watch underneath it, W-A-T-C-H. So this is the Watchers who are going to originate the concept of polygamy. The other subtle detail is we know that all of this occult mysticism is based on the as above, so below, the humanity trying to connect with the spirit realm, and the spirit realm trying to connect with humanity. And when you overlap the two, you get the henosis of humanity with the spirit realm. The six-pointed star inside of the circle, that originates back with these fallen angels who made it with the women. And we know that this is the seal of Solomon. We know that they were using this for child sacrifice when they were sacrificing the children to Baal and Moloch. So all of this, the secret societies and these ancient models go back to these fallen angels. So, you can surmise that somewhere in here there's going to be this as above, so below paradigm. It's also called the right side up, upside down paradigm, or Aleister Crowley referred to it as the law of reversal, where they take everything and they flip it upside down. Jonathan Clegg is famous for really popularizing this concept and revealing it in a very cool and interesting way with great spiritual discernment. And so, Crowley called it the law of reversal. We'll take the cross and we'll flip it upside down, and we'll say the Our Father backwards, and blah blah blah. So we see it right here in the middle. Notice that they took the two A's right here and they connected them with this little swoosh right here, so that they're a reflection of each other. This is the right side versus left side paradigm, the law of reversal, the mirror image of the double A's. And then even the S in the middle represents the as above, so below, law of reversal as well, because this is the same as this. It's very subtle, but nonetheless, they found a way to include the law of reversal right there in their insignia. And I'm sure there's more. There's things that I'm probably not going to see. I do see here that they've got the symbol for the women, 2 women and 1 man. Over here on the right, it's a very pixelated image, but every image you'll see that the belly button is accentuated on both of these women. And I think what they're trying to do is they want to get the eyes to hone in on the belly button, not only because it's a sensual part of a woman's body, but it represents the birth of these fallen watcher angels. We know that the book of Enoch even describes how some of these giants were so big that they actually split open their mother's wombs and ripped out through their umbilical area. And so there's some subtle details there of why they're highlighting that. And then lastly, we notice that there are two strains of wheat here. This represents the wheat and the tares. We know that in the garden, we have the mystery of the garden. Whatever you believe it was, we know that Eve ate the forbidden fruit, whatever that was, and then immediately the very next verse is God condemning them and talking about a seed of a woman that would do battle with a seed of the serpent. And that word seed is zera, which means sperm, semen, and that which produces a generation, a posterity. So it's a physical thing. So we have in Genesis 3, we see immediately there's 2 seed lines. There's the serpent seed and the seed of the woman, which is the Adamic seed. But we know in Matthew 13 that Jesus describes, one of the mysteries of the beginning of the origins of time, that, the enemy snuck in and sowed his tares, these weeds amongst the wheat. But they look identical to one another, and they're difficult to tell apart. And so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at 2 species here of wheat that look almost identical, that represent the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And then the final thing that I want to go through, it's a very important detail, is the hand gesture that both of these women are making here and here. It's a very unnatural position to put your hand. If you try and do it, everybody can do the image that Spock on Star Trek does, the V. But when you try to make your middle and ring finger come together, it takes a little extra coordination to make that symbol. So it is not a natural hand gesture that both of these women are doing. But what it is a very prominent symbol that represents the serpent seed. It represents the mystery Babylonian religions that go all the way back. And it essentially represents the bloodlines of the Illuminati. These are the illuminated ones who are directing the affairs of men on this planet. And the more you look throughout history, the more you'll see it. Probably an area where you'll see it more than any place is the Renaissance, because of the fact that that's when they were really doing a lot of artistic work and drawings of people. But you'll see it in religious leaders. You'll see it in political leaders. I believe this is either Joseph Smith or Brigham Young. These 2 are Mormon parishioners, but you'll see both of their hands, the middle fingers are together. The 2 gestures that you'll always see is it's either on their side, like we see here, or it's the famous Masonic M-shaped hand signal on the hip. And we'll look at that going forward. But again, like Ignatius of Loyola, who invented the Jesuit priesthood, which is a secret society within the Roman Catholic Church, many religious leaders will all be depicted with that symbol. What's trying to be demonstrated here is that there is a secret group of men at the top of the pyramid These have always been the elites. These are the ones who are have been initiated into the secret societies. They were the leaders of the Babylonian system, who then later would become the leaders of Egypt, the pharaohs, and then later would become the Caesars of Rome, and so on and so forth. They're the presidents and the world leaders today. They're the people who are in the know, who are part of this global cabal power structure. And so men of prominence have always been displayed in this fashion, like Newton here and other generals. Both of these men, you can see they have their right arm on their side with the two middle fingers connected. That, if you try and do that, put your hand on your side with those two middle fingers connected, that is not a natural position, but rather it's a pose. They're striking a pose and trying to display something in the imagery that only those in the know would understand, because that's what the word occult means. It means hidden but in plain sight. When we order x-rays of someone to look at their broken bones, sometime the radiologist would say there is an occult fracture on the lateral oblique, and they would describe where it is, and you'd have to go to that specific image to see it. It is there in plain sight, but it's occult, it's hidden, and you have to know what you're looking for. And so these men understand this. They didn't just pose like this for nothing. Who puts their hand on their stomach and does the double V with their hand when someone's going to draw an image of you or take your photo? It's a purpose-driven position. And we see it throughout all the prominent religious and military leaders of history. We see it in the popes. We see it in the Nazis. For those of you who haven't seen it, Days of Noah 56, I spent a lot of time reading multiple books of history and pinning together the story of the Third Reich and how they were supported by the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Pius, and how the church developed the rat lines and gave all of the fake passports and allowed all of the Nazi generals to escape into South America. And so, there's always been a deep connection between these two organizations. That's why we see the symbolism here. Now, what they'd have you believe is that Jesus is also part of this secret bloodline. And I'm here to debunk that. They believe that Jesus Christ was not the Christ, the anointed one, the Messiah that fulfilled all the prophecies of the Bible, is the Son of God, is God in the flesh, God incarnate in human form, who came to take all of the sins of the world for humanity and offer redemption and salvation. But rather they believe that he was some kind of ascended master. He's one of these, they believe he's one of these enlightened ones. They refer to him as the Aryan Christ or the Masonic Christ. And so these members of these secret societies, who were these prominent men of history in the Renaissance, they drew pictures of Christ with the symbol, trying to, suggest to the viewers of this imagery that Christ was just another one of these common men who had ascended, through occultism and theosophy and mysticism. He developed the Christ consciousness and became endowed with all these powers and, so on and so forth. And if you're interested in that, we look at that in Days of Noah 57, where we look at the Omega point, and then Days of Noah 40, where we look at the Aryan Christ. But, I reject that, and I believe that he is of a royal bloodline. Make no mistake. He is of the seed of the woman, which is the most royal bloodline in the universe. He hails from the line of King David himself. And he goes back to the tribe of Judah and can be traced all the way back through the patriarchs, all the way to Adam and Eve, who are made in the image of God. Jesus Christ, the Messiah, Yeshua, he represents the human race, the Adamic race, those made in the image of Adam, who currently, as we speak, a secret reptilian hybrid race masquerading as human beings are doing everything they can to destroy the planet, usher in their Führer, their anti-Messiah, and promote a genetic contamination that is infiltrated with serpent DNA. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now. We're going to get into that more on a different platform. But Jesus is of a divine royal bloodline, but not in the perverted way that the bloodlines of the Illuminati would have you believe. And we see it in the women as well. So here is Ivanka Trump, and we know that she is a Kabbalist. She is a practicing Talmudic Jew, not to be confused with the type of Jews that hailed back from Judea, who were of the Hebrew line, the ones that Jesus Christ, Jesus was a Jew, but he was not a Talmudic Jew like the Pharisees were. The Pharisees and the Sadducees who conspired to kill the Messiah, the one that Jesus actually told them that they were a brood of vipers and that they came from their father the devil, they practiced the Babylonian Talmud, which is based on Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, witchcraft, and sorcery. And so, when we say the word Jew, we have to define what we're speaking about. We see it here with Obama. We see it in many different imageries of many different famous women throughout history. This is not a natural way to put your hand on your hip. I don't care how many times you try it, it's not natural. Now, if you pay attention and look for it, you'll find it in all of the Disney stories, particularly the stories that have to do with royalty, because they're very subconsciously trying to display these royal bloodlines, the blue bloods that go back throughout the Dark Ages and throughout the Renaissance, as far as time will reveal. And so that's why you'll always see, either the kings or the queens or the princesses who wear the royalty, the tiaras, who will display the symbol. And the reason why is obvious, and it's because Walt Disney himself was a 33rd degree Freemason. He was of the Demolay. And he started Disneyland as a way to start putting these thoughts and concepts into the minds of our children through subliminal and predictive programming. And the Disneyland Masonic Club, one of the original purposes of it, not only is it to brainwash our kids, but it was also to attract young children for the purposes of pedophilia. And most people are aware that Hollywood was built around these secret organizations and pedophilia, which is all part of this ancient Babylonian mystery religion that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. So here's another image. Who sleeps like this? Who sleeps with their hand on their side and their two middle fingers connected? So again, it's clearly not a natural pose. Now, what's interesting is over time, as we move from the Renaissance into the 20th century, somewhere around there, we start to see the symbol take on a little bit different representation. Now the hand goes inside of the breast jacket, and it's the sign of the master of the second veil. And essentially what we're talking about is a veiled hand. In other words, what these people are portraying in the image is that on the surface you see what they want you to see, but they're letting you know that underneath there's really a secret, that they're doing something secretive, that they belong to these secret societies, and that they are part of the cabal, and this is their way of letting the world, those who are in the know, letting them know it. That's why we see Joseph Stalin with that image here now. That's why you'll see all the great military leaders like Napoleon and many others who all will have their hand inside of their breast jacket, representing the secret hand or the secret veil. We see this with the Catholic popes, multiple places, going back a long ways. We see the veiled hand in royalty, like we see with this image here, where he's got the wheat and the tares, the two seed lines on his breast jacket. His hand is veiled. In this image, the same image here, he's standing on a checkered floor, which is a classic Masonic symbol. We see it with modern day royalty. We see it with all the rich, prominent businessmen of history, the bankers, the presidents, the Rothschilds who started the famous Bank of England and the fractional reserve system that we're still operating under today under the illegal Federal Reserve. You're beginning to get the picture here. All these prominent, wealthy men who are the powerful men of the world, the billionaires, the movers and the shakers, the ones who go to the Bilderberg Group, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome. They've always been the ones at the top of the pyramid structure who've always been running the planet. And they manipulate everybody below them. They're at the top of the pyramid structure, and we're down here at the bottom, and they've been able to control and manipulate us for millennia. And it's only now, in the last days, when the Bible prophesied that when the book of Revelation was unsealed and the angel is talking to Daniel, he tells Daniel that in the last day, knowledge would increase to and fro. And it's only now, with the invention of the internet and the ability for us to look back through all the annals of history, that we're being able to see this unveiled hand that's always been there. All the military leaders, all the generals, we have prominent organizations like the Skull and Bones Society, which is a secret society of Yale, I believe, or Harvard. I think it's Yale. But, men like George W. Bush, Secretary Kerry, many of the world leading bankers, they were all part of the Skull and Bones Society. And here's the guy with the veiled hand, letting those people who see this image, letting them know that they're part of the cabal. Many of the presidents were part of this organization. They were all of the Masonic religion. Here we see the veiled hand with Mason. He's wearing the Masonic apron with the upside down pyramid and the all-seeing eye with the rays of illumination around it. The same thing that we see on our at the top of our dollar bill. This represents these royal bloodlines of the Illuminati. We've looked at studies in the past where almost all of the presidents are kin to one another. They're all connected through family and genealogical records, and most of them are connected to European royalty. This is how they communicate with one another. They let each other know that there is a secret veiled hand, that even though the people believe they voted someone into the office, in reality, it's all controlled opposition, and there's a secret veil that's running the world. Another image of Mayer Rothschild. You see it with men like Edgar Allan Poe, Darwin, Frederick Bartholdi, who invented the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty, which have deep occult roots. Pretty much all the prominent men of history seem to be included within the secret veil, the secret society system. And it's definitely a symbol for the communist regime, without question, whether it be Lenin, Stalin, Marx, they are all part of that power structure. This is the seed of the serpent who's running the planet. And so this was all born out of simply taking a moment and sitting in an airport and having a beer. And we just have to keep our eyes open to the symbolism out there, because we know that these occultists like to do things in plain sight. I find it fascinating that here we are 5,000 years after the flood, and we're still seeing these concepts being promoted, because the consciousness of what occurred in the pre-flood era still has existed throughout time and is being popularized now. Now, the word polygamy comes from polygamy. Poly means many, and gamos means marriage, but it actually comes from the word gamete, which is a genetic term. A gamete is a mature sexual reproductive cell having a single set of unpaired chromosomes. And so really what this is about is the fallen angels wanting to spread their genetics into as many women as possible to corrupt as much of the Adamic race as possible. Now, when Joseph Smith, founder of the Mormon Church, received a revelation in 1831, which he said was a commandment from God to enter into polygamy, he first resisted it. But then between 1834 and 1842, an angel came to him no fewer than 3 times, urging him to do it. And so Smith decided to go forward and obey the commandment fully. Now, I don't doubt that an angel visited Joseph Smith, but I don't believe it was an angel of the Most High God. It was likely one of these fallen angels who presented themselves and were able to deceive him. In fact, the first place that we see polygamy being mentioned in the scripture is actually with the line of Cain in Genesis 4, where when we look at Cain's lineage, we see that Lamech is the first one to take multiple wives. And so, it obviously wasn't the original plan. We don't see Adam with 3 wives. God gave Adam 1 wife who he would have a monogamous relationship with to become one spirit, one flesh. And so the other thing that we see with this polygamy, which we've now confirmed goes back before the flood, is it seems to be hand in hand with pedophilia, with taking these young women. And so it came to pass that Joseph Smith, the creator of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, took to himself up to 40 wives, engaging in sexual relations with women between 12 and 14. 12 years old is that is a very young girl to be initiated in something like that. And the thing that we have to understand is that, once innocence has been taken, it cannot be given back. See, that's what the tree of knowledge really is. It's the knowledge of good and evil. When you bite from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you can't take it away. Once your young daughter or son is allowed to see that pornography or witness or be a part of some kind of sexual interaction, they're no longer innocent. when you partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you can't take it away. And so, as followers of Christ, we should be doing what we can to try and protect the innocence of the younger people who need time. They need time to mature and develop into the young men and women that they're called to be. And then when they have the proper understanding, the proper maturity level, then they can proceed forward and have a relationship, a monogamous relationship with one person who they can truly become fully united with physically and spiritually. And that is the design that God had always created going back in the garden. But the same way that the fallen angels hijacked God's design genetically, they've also hijacked God's design spiritually and emotionally, which is why even to this day we still see the promotion of polygamy in some societies. And so that's it for today, guys. And hopefully here soon we'll be putting out some more videos, and eventually we're going to be on these other platforms, and I will definitely give you a notice when that happens. So Godspeed, and we'll see you on the next one.